Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session. Am I audible? Hello,
Good afternoon, sir.
very good
Yes,
afternoon.
sir, audible.
Okay, now the screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll start with block 4, and it's about the settlement structure and hierarchy. I think in the previous unit we have already discussed about different types of urban settlement and different types of rural settlement also. So here what we will be diving into is basically the structure and morphology of rural settlement, structure and morphology of urban settlement, in which we will be looking into different theories, and then settlement hierarchy, and what are the different settlement policies and programs, and mostly in respect to India. Okay, so there are different global policies, but we'll be looking mostly into the Indian context. So first, let's understand what do we mean by what is the literal meaning of morphology. Morphology is basically the study of forms, basically particular form, shape, or structure. Okay, so in the previous class also I have explained about what is morphology. So here in settlement morphology, what we are basically looking into, we are basically looking into different kinds of landscape. Okay, so landscape can be of different types. I think in the previous class also we were discussing about the physical landscape and the cultural landscape. Even there is a term called social landscape, and we have already discussed about all these things. So first, let's try to understand what are the different morphology of rural settlement. Okay, so what is the morphology of rural settlement? So I think I don't need to explain you about what are the different elements or what are the different components of rural settlement and how rural settlements are basically defined now, because we have already discussed according to census of India which places will be considered as urban places and which places will be considered as rural places. So based on that, rural settlement has been defined here, and a different elements has been taken. Okay, so depending upon the size of population, depending upon the location, and depending upon different functions it is actually performing, so we can simply define the rural settlement. So which are the rural settlements then? So definitely these are the entities in which most of the people are engaged in mostly primary activities, and it actually perform less functions as compared to urban centers. Urban centers are basically multifunctional in nature, while rural settlements basically do provide different types of functions now, because that is how social strata has been formed. Different people will be practicing different types of economic activities. So that's how even caste system in our religion actually evolved. Okay, so although there are different functions and different types of economic activities that are being performed by the rural settlement people, but uh, the urban settlements are much more dynamic in nature, and they do perform a lot of functions as compared to the rural settlements. Okay, so here you can go through different definitions that has been given about the rural settlement. And what is the nature and characteristics of rural settlement? Now, everything that is basically being found in villages are basically the characteristics and elements and components of rural settlements. So, what are the different nature and characteristics? I think in the previous class also we are discussing about how Census of India defined settlements. Now, just like an urban settlement should be having more than 5,000 population, and it should be having a population density which should be more than 400 people per square kilometer, and at least there should be more than 75% of male working population. They should be engaged in non-agricultural activities, and urban places should be having municipality or cantonment areas. So what are the different characteristics of rural population or rural settlements? So it will be marked by low population size and even low population density. And next thing, the agriculture will be the main economic activity of people. Now, other than agriculture, there will be other primary activities that will be performed by the settlers of villages, and definitely rural areas, just like fishing, animal husbandry, mining and quarrying, then gathering of forest product. So these are the important economic activities that are being performed by the rural settlement people. And the village community basically displays homogeneity. Okay, so what is that homogeneity in culture? And occupation is basically hereditary in nature. So nowadays even the rural settlements are changing a bit, but if we'll be looking into the past and look into the rural settlements, most of the people they follow what their ancestors did as their occupation. Okay, so most of the agriculturers will be will be agriculturers nowadays. And so that is how the caste system has been formed in India. Okay, so you can look here. Occupation is mainly hereditary, creating social strata known as caste. Okay, and there is a very low scope of social mobility. Okay, so the social mobility is very low here in rural settlements. And although as compared to urban settlements, the community bonding, okay, the community bonding among the people of rural settlements will be more as compared to urban settlements. So what is the morphology of rural settlements? So morphology is basically the internal structure and layout plan, and that can be divided into different subcategories. And morphology can be divided into physical morphology and social morphology. Okay, I think in the previous class also we have discussed about physical morphology and what are the different examples of social morphology or cultural morphology. So physical morphology is basically all the physical landscape that you see and that is physically available. Okay, and social morphology or the cultural morphology basically is basically defined by what are the different cultural activities that are being performed by the rural settlements or those settlements. So that will define the cultural landscape or the social morphology of that place. Okay, so physical landscape do have different components also. First, you are having the ground plan that basically includes the arrangement of buildings, marketplaces, and street patterns. Then you have built up areas. So built up areas are basically settled areas that are constantly under change. Okay, these are basically dynamic areas. And even the built up areas have different parts. So what are the different parts of built up areas or the settled areas that are constantly changing? So first part is basically your homogeneous sector or village core. So we'll be discussing about the concentric core model of Burgess. So in which he has explained about different structures. Okay, different structures of urban morphology and different structures of rural morphology. And here if you will be looking into the village core, it will be inhabited by the headman, and all the important people. So they will be living at the center of any village. Okay, so these are basically lived by village headman, landlord's house. Even religious sites are found here. Even water bodies are found in the middle of different rural settlements, and these are basically inhabited by dominant community. So among that locality, the whichever community is basically dominant, so they will be living mostly in the central places or center areas. Then you have transitional zones. So first of all, you are having, okay, you are having a core here. Then you have the transitional zone. So what is the transitional zone? Transitional zone is basically which is connecting the central part or the village core with the outer part. Outer part is basically connected by different roads, and different newly migrated people, they start living in the outer part of the village. So that is basically the transitional zone. Okay, so transitional zone is basically inhabited by servicemen like milkman, washerman, weaver, blacksmith, goldsmith. So all these people are basically staying in that transitional zone, which is basically connecting the inner core with the outer part. That is basically circulatory part. Okay, so this is basically a periphery of the village, and that is being connected by different roads and lanes, and where newly migrated people build their new houses. And then you have another component or another part, that is your special part. So special part, you may be having, schools, temples, and farms, so which will be outside the core village periphery, and those will be included under this special part. Okay. Constantinus A. Doxius is the basically the father of human settlement. We say the father of human settlement. He is the father of ecstatics. Ecstatic is basically, ecstatics meaning the science of human settlement. And Doxius is actually defined different dimensions, okay, different elements of rural settlement, and what are the different elements of human settlement. And if, in terms of rural settlement, it will be different, and in terms of urban settlement, it will be something different. So what is the natural element of human settlement? So all the part of nature is basically natural element. So there are different factors. We have already studied about different factors which are influencing the distribution of population, and those are basically the factors, or all those natural factors, just like climate, soil, the plains and plateau areas, then all this availability of water and natural vegetation, and even the natural resources. So if these natural resources are abundantly available, then mostly you're gonna see human settlements building around the corner. Okay, so and if you don't find a favorable climatic condition, or favorable suitable or fertile land, then most of the people will be discouraged to build their houses there. So definitely there is a natural element of this is the natural element of human settlement. Then what is the human interaction of human settlement? It is basically the ability of changing. Okay, ability of changing, that is the human interaction, and that is basically that is very critical in nature. Okay, that is very important in nature. Why? Now, because unless and until you do have human interaction among themselves, then the society will not form, the organization will not form. Now even in rural areas there is human interaction, even in urban areas there is human interaction. So without human interaction, human settlement cannot be possible. Then you have society or community, so that develops through human interaction only. and that also develops through different economic activities and cultural interaction. Now, because uh, let's take the example of different economic activities, how they are building the community or building the society. Now, if in the early times, if a lot of people will be engaged in agricultural activities, and if some community or if a group of people they know how to cultivate a field in a better way, and that basically help them producing different crops in less time. So these are basically techniques, and that comes through different experiences. And if there will be another group of people, they will start interacting with them. Then uh, they will be then comes the friendship part. Okay, so the relationship will be built, and a society and community will develop. Okay, so there is this component or this element of human settlement which is also necessary. Then you have sales or protection. So human settlement on everywhere you're gonna see all those settlements that has been built in rural areas or even in urban areas. So they basically look into the security aspect. Now, if protection is not provided, if the security is very low, so people will be discouraged to live there. Okay, so in that way, what will happen? The human settlements will not form there. Now you may see some sort of hamlets there, and maybe that will be specialized for some sort of functions. But for a larger human settlement, you need this protection element. Then interaction is basically uh, network is that is basically the interaction with other settlements, exchange of goods and resources, then services that expand the settlement functional boundary. Okay, so human interaction here, and then comes your network. Okay, so these are different concentric models that has been given by Doxiasis. So this is the core, okay, the core of the village, and that is basically being lived by headmans, and we have already discussed. And then this is the transitional zone, and this is the circulatory part. Now, where most of the newly migrated people they start building their houses or settlements. Okay, then site and situation. Okay, so site and situation play a very vital role in rural morphology. Now, because site basically explains you about different physical factors, different economic factor, and the cultural factors, so which basically encouraged the settlers to build their houses there. Okay, so site is something and situation is something. I think we have gone through the concepts of site and situation. So within site factor, you have the physical aspect, the climatic aspect, the economic aspect, and the traditional aspect. Okay, so if we'll be briefly explaining about the physical aspect, so within physical aspect, we have already discussed about, okay, what are the different factors which are affecting the population distribution. Now here, these are the factors. Those are the factors which are also influencing the site factor. Okay, so what are the physical factors? Physical factors are basically your land and soil, then water. Okay, so physical factors can be divided into the aspect and the shelter. Okay, so aspect basically means the direction in which the land faces. And in physical geography, you might have came across this word aspect, or maybe in drainage basin morphometry studies, where you might have already I have no idea whether you did your graduation in geography or not, but all the geography students can actually connect with me. So what is aspect? Aspect is basically that part of the slope which basically receives high amount of insolation. Now if we people need insolation, we people need sunlight. And if uh, any slope which is receiving high amount of insolation or sunshine, that is basically suitable for agricultural production. So a lot of people will be encouraged to build their shelters there. Okay, so then what is shelter? Shelter is basically houses. Okay, it basically protects us from uh, wild animals, it protects us from extreme weather conditions. So that is your shelter. Land and soil is basically the fertility. Okay, so if the land is fertile or the soil is fertile, the human the human settlement will flourish there. And if the land is not fertile, then definitely a lot of people will not be living there unless and until it is performing some kind of special function. Water, availability of water is very important for human survival. So therefore water becomes very important in terms of defining the site. Okay, so if that site do not have water availability, then it becomes very difficult for the settlers there to live a life. So water is basically related with two types, that is wet point and dry points. So wet points are basically found in dry climatic regions where where you will be find some water points. So that is your wet point. Okay, so in dry climatic settlements, if you find the water points, then it is your wet point. And basically in deserts, if settlements are basically sprung off near the oasis or springs, then those are basically the wet points. What are the different examples of wet points? River confluence sites, river bend sites, stream sites, okay, coastal side, delta side, canal and well side. So all these are wet points. So now, just like if we'll be taking the example of third desert, I think Indira Gandhi Canal or Nahar is there, and a lot of settlements has been built near the periphery of that canal. So that is the example of wet point. Now, because the Rajasthan area is basically characterized by dry climate, and it is being supported by the settlers are being supported by this wet point. Then what is dry point? Dry point is basically, so when you will be having or you will be living in or the settlements are in humid region, and settlements are found in natural levees. Okay, so those are basically dry points. So what it basically explaining us, so in coastal regions, most of the people will be preferring to live in height places. Okay, so which is slightly elevated from the sea level or the plain area, or else what will happen, the year annual flood will inundate their houses. So that is basically a problem. So those are the examples of dry ponds. You can take the example of Kolkata. So Kolkata has been built, not built, sorry. The Kolkata is basically situated on natural levee of Ganga river. Then different climatic factors like rainfall, humidity and temperature. Then okay, why groundwater and river canals has been given here, I don't have any idea. But if we'll be looking into climatic factors, basically rainfall, humidity and temperature plays a vital role uh, in defining the site. Okay, that in terms of physical site. So what are the different economic factors of site? It is basically the availability of resources. If abundant natural resources are found there, then a lot of people will be encouraged to choose that site as their settlement. Okay, now what are the different natural resources? just like mineral resources, food resources, or even oil. So if all these kind of resources are basically found in a certain region, then the settlement will grow and the settlement will flourish. So these are the different examples that has been given. Okay, California, San Francisco, and uh, these settlements are basically flourished nearby the gold mines. Then even in India, you have Jharia and Jharsuguda. So these are basically mining towns. So all the towns nearby the Chota Nagpur plateau are basically flourishing uh, because of this mineral resources only. So within economic factors, you have nodal points. So actually, nodal points are those points which do provide you good connectivity, and uh, if transportation, those are basically the transportation points. Okay, so they do provide you different transportation services. So that's why in that way what will happen if there are nodal points and the transportation and communication facilities are well developed, then the economic activities will flourish. So in that case, that can be a good site for the human settlement. Then what are the different traditional factors? So traditional factors just like defense. Okay, so previously, classically, if we'll be looking into the settlement patterns of the rural villages or the city areas, so they basically looked into the security. Okay, so if and they have built different forts. So defense is one of the traditional factors. Then you have a breaching point. So that is just like uh, just like the point that we have already discussed in the nodal points. So this can actually help you understand. Okay, so this breaching point is basically the nodal factor. Now here cultural factors are different cultural factors also play important roles in terms of uh, the human settlement development. Now just like religious temples and educational universities. So all these are cultural factors. Okay, so that basically determine the settlement site. What is the situation? Situation is basically uh, the relationship between site. Okay, so there is a close relationship between site and its immediate physical environment. So situation is something, just like in previous classes I was giving examples of political stability and political instability. So that can be considered as a situation. Okay, so situation can be cultural situation just like uh, if if you belong to certain community and you want to live among other communities. Okay, so that do not give you uh, favorable conditions in there. Okay, so why? Now because their culture is something different and your culture is something different. And now just like if I'll be giving examples of Indians living in China. So your culture is something different. You people cannot simply migrate to China and permanently settle there unless and until you get a very good job and get a hefty salary. Okay, so most of the people will prefer to live in India because we do have different cultural aspects and that cannot be matched if we'll be migrating to China, and their fooding habits, their fashion styles, so their cultural beliefs, their behaviors altogether are very different in nature. So you can't simply adjust there. Okay, so that is basically the situation, and that is the difference between site and situation. So hierarchy of rural settlement. So how can we define the hierarchy of rural settlement? Based on the size of settlement, based on the population size. So we can compare the rural settlement. Okay. So first of all, you have villages, you have hamleted and isolated villages. Okay, isolated settlements. So these are different types of rural settlements. I think in the previous class also we are discussing about the dispersed settlement. That is basically the houses there are widely spaced. Now here in villages and hamlets and isolated settlements. Isolated settlements are very small settlements. Then comes your hamlet. Hamlets are basically small rural settlements, and then comes your villages. Okay, so rural settlements can be defined in this way, and this is the hierarchy of rural settlements. So different parts of the globe do call these villages or hamlets or isolated settlements in different names. Just like in Afghanistan, hamlets are basically called Kala. Okay, and in Germany they are called Welle, and villages are basically called Dorp. Okay, and in Indonesia they are called Kampung. Then in Poland, Osada, in Ireland, Klakan. Okay, so these are the different names for different types of villages. Now, because hamlets are different, even the isolated settlements are different, and the villages are different. So, uh, the size of population in village, what is the difference then? The size of population in villages will be much more than that of hamlets and that of isolated settlements. So different definitions has been explained here about, or definitions has been given here about the villages. So that may vary from country to country. Now, just like in India, we have different types of villages. I think based on the population size, even we are having villages if rural settlements are inhabited by less than 200 people also. Okay, and if the population size is even more than 5,000 or even more than 10,000, we do have the concept of village in India. But in other countries, maybe in Scandinavian countries of Europe, their concept of village is something different. They based on the population size, they even decide the urban places or urban centers. So the human settlement will change based on the population size and based on the functions it is performing, but uh, mostly defining the village or defining the rural settlement, it is basically something different. So my point is it may vary from country to country or from place to place. So in India, the term rural settlements means a revenue village. That is what we call Moja. Okay, in 1971 census, it has been officially introduced, and each revenue village has a separate boundary and administrative unit. Okay, that now we are having gram panchayats. Okay, under one revenue village there are many hamlets, each having different names. Now, just like within one village or within one gram panchayat, you will be having different padas. Okay, or different hamlets. So that will be inhabited by different social strata or different peoples from different social strata. So so this term is also used in Bangladesh and Pakistan. So as I have told you, the concept of village may change from country to country, and hamlets can be found even within a village, or hamlets can be found in isolation also. So what are the external layouts of a village, and how we can study the external layouts of village? So there are different data sources through which we can study external layouts of different villages. Even you can go through topographical maps, they do provide you authentic data. And computer aided programs are also there, just like use of remote sensing and GIS, that can help you understand the external layout of villages. We have already discussed about different types of uh, rural settlements based on their shape, different types of rural settlement based on their forms. So this can be studied using topographical maps or high resolution satellite imageries also. So what are the different methods in which we can determine the types and patterns of rural settlement? So we can use the index of concentration, nearest neighborhood analysis, and safe index. What is the index of concentration? It was basically introduced by French geographers Albert Demangeon. Okay, so the mathematical formula has been given here. C is equal to E multiplied by N divided by T. Here the C is the coefficient, E is the population of the settlement, and N is the number of settlement excluding the cheap settlement, where T is the total population. Okay. So different scales has been also, I think different scales will be discussed here. Now, just like here in index of concentration that has been developed by Debu Averi in 1943, you, you can see these values, okay, concentration values. What is the mathematical formula he has used? So he used K equals to X multiplied by L divided by H, and these are the different explanation for all the symbols that has been used. And if you are doing any empirical studies and the value, the index value of, just a minute please. Okay. So if the index value are above 1.50, then the type of settlement can be called as compact. What does that really mean? The space between the houses or the space between the settlements are very close. Okay. So here, if the value comes in and around 1 to 1.5, then it is basically semi-nucleated or semi-compact. If the value is between 0.5 to 1, then those settlements are basically that can be termed as hamleted settlements. And if the value comes below 0.5, then those can be defined or identified as dispersed settlements. So these are different discussions that has been given based on the compact settlement, semi-compact settlement, hamleted and dispersed settlements. So here, this type of settlement basically shows agglomeration of almost all the dwellings in one place. What does that really mean? You know, within that village, you will see the houses are basically closely spaced. The settlements are closely spaced. So it may be 30 or 40 hamlets or hundreds or thousands of houses in one place. Okay, so there can be, let's say this is a hamlet and nearby area is also a hamlet and the nearby area is also a hamlet. So all together we can consider this as compact settlement. And if now mark my words, if the distance between these hamlets, okay, the distance between these hamlets is uh, big, then you can simply consider this as nucleated settlement or compact settlement. Now because the compact settlements do have the nature of uh, the compactness, do have the nature where the houses will be closely spaced, then Then you have semi-compact settlements and the Indian villages. If you look into the Indian villages, you can clearly see these kind of settlements. These are the Indian villages are best examples of semi-compact settlements. Now, because you'll see different types of hamlets. Okay, Pora, uh, Sahi. Okay, so all these are basically the hamlets. These are the concepts of hamlets. All together will be forming the semi-compact settlement. Hamlets are basically quite dispersed settlements, and if isolated hamlets are found, then mostly those hamlets will be found nearby the hilly regions or mountainous regions. Then dispersed settlements. Okay, so those dwellings or units, those are located scattered and very much away from each other. So this is basically the method of index of concentration. Then you can have the nearest neighbor analysis. So what does that really mean? Nearest neighbor analysis. So through this formula, okay, through this formula, we can define the uh, the space between different settlements. So if so, this is the formula. This is the mathematical formula, and the explanations of different symbols has been given here. Rn is basically the nearest neighbor value. D basically means the observed nearest neighbor distance. A is the area, and N is the total number of points that you are taking for your empirical study. And if the value is between 0 to 1, then you can simply term that as cluster. Now, because if the value is very close to 0, it is very much nucleated in nature, and if the value is close to 2.15, then you will be having uniform distribution, and uh, it will be dispersed. Mostly dispersed settlements will be found. Okay, so based on SEP index that has been given by or proposed by Peter Haggett in 1965, so it will define the shape of a place or shape of the rural settlements. So in which he has explained this or derived this mathematical formula. You have to get the area, okay, area of the shape and longest internal axis. So through which you can find different values. By putting this formula, you can find different values, and you can simply define that settlement as triangular or square shaped or hexagonal shaped. So what are the different patterns of rural settlement? I think we have already discussed about different types of rural settlement based on shape. So these are linear patterns which are basically very straight, and those are basically found uh, alongside the roadways or even the rivers. Then rectangular shape or square shaped. We can go through this. Okay, so rural houses types with reference to India, and if we'll be looking into the rural settlements in India, although we'll be discussing about uh, different initiatives that has been taken by the government of India to construct houses of rural settlement dwellers, and but mostly in rural areas, if we will be diving into the 90s and if we'll be diving into the 80s, then most of the people will be living in kacha houses or earthen houses, and the size of the rural settlements are very small. Okay, so what are the different building materials they used? They basically used all the natural materials they found nearby. and it will vary from now there will be regional variation in terms of different types of building material those are being used in different parts of our country or different parts of the globe. Now, just like in India, after harvesting, after the production of rice or after rice is harvested, you are left with fodder. So the earthen houses are basically covered by this kind of fodders. Then in some places you will see you will see different other building materials. Okay, so there is regional variation. Now India, all the rural settlements those are found in India will have different types of building materials, different types of shapes and sizes. The structure of the rural settlements will be different than that of, let's say, European countries or American countries. Now, because the settlers will have to adapt to the natural environment, what are the different resources they are getting out of the natural environment. Based on that only, they will be settling there. So these are the internal layout. We have discussed something about the external layout. These are the internal layout of rural houses, and in this can be easily understood. Okay, courtyard or locally known as angan. So in India, you know what is angan. It is basically a rectangular or square shaped open space that is basically surrounded by the rooms or walls, and that is used for interaction, social interaction purposes. And you have roofed or thatched verandas. Then different raised platforms are also seen even in India. Okay, place for cow dung collection is also there in rural villages. You will see they will be collecting cow dung, and rural houses will be of different shapes. Then what are the different building material they will be using? They mostly based on 2011 census, you can look into that. In rural India, 21% of houses basically used grass, thatch, bamboo, wood, mud plastic, polythene in the roof. Okay, 43% used handmade tiles, machine made tiles, metals. Okay, so then even 35% of people they use brick, stone, slate, or concrete. So these are the building materials. You can look into this also. And there are different types of houses that are basically found in the rural villages or the rural settlements. One can be your kacha houses, then one can be your pakka houses, and you can also find some mixed houses where some of the material of the houses will be pakka, and others will be the building materials of kacha houses. You can dive into the tribal houses in India, and if you will be visiting the Northeast India, even different tribal communities of Eastern Ghat and Western Ghat, even the Vindhyan and Satpura range. So you can look into the patterns they used, the structure or the building material they used for the construction of their houses. And in Northeast, they they used bamboo structures, wooden pillars. So for example, in Nagaland, in front of their houses they usually dons a big horns. Okay, so that basically signify their hunting background. And different places will be having their tribal houses and tribal settlements, and they may vary to some extent, but if you will be generalizing the fact, those tribal settlements will be mostly uh, they will be dependent, they were mostly dependent on the natural resources which were available. Okay. So what is the social morphology of rural settlements in India? I think to understand the social morphology, you people are living in India, and you know it very well about the cultural landscape, about the social landscape of India, and different texts are also there that basically tells you about the social landscape and the social morphology. Okay, so what are the different caste systems which are present in India? What are the different types of functions they do perform? Okay, and different studies has been done. You can go through it. Different studies has been done in different parts of India, and they have cited different interpretation. They have drawn conclusions uh, about the social morphology. So like Santi Bhushan Nandi and D.S. Taggi in 2006, so they divided Indian villages into different parts. Say place clusters, agglomerates, you have linear clusters, then you have square or rectangular clusters, villages formed with isolated homesteads. Okay. Yeah, different examples has been given and different images has been given to support. And these are the census categories of rural settlements in India. In on inhabited villages, then you have inhabited villages. So basically, inhabited villages are the revenue villages that we basically discussed as mozas, and it has a definite name. So a village will be having a name, and it will be having a survey boundary. So that will be comprising of different hamlets or different parts. Okay. So this table basically gives you the data and population size, percentage of villages which are found in between this. Okay. So we haven't seen any village which is having a population size less than 200. So these are the uh, different data that has been given. So mostly 200 to 500 population size is the dominant figure here, and a lot of rural settlements are basically belong to this kind of settlement, this kind of population size. And there will be spatial variation. Okay, so there will be spatial variation now, because whatever is happening there in UP, or the spatial variation, or the the identity and the characteristics which can be drawn in the rural settlements of UP villages or Rajasthan villages cannot be found in Odisha villages. So Odisha will be having a different population structure. Now maybe in Rajasthan, now just hypothetically think, um, in Rajasthan you may see, the different villages are having a very low population. Okay, a low population size. So if we take into account the UP villages, the UP villages will be inhabited by a very large population size. Okay, so that is the spatial variation here. structure and morphology of urban settlements. So we'll briefly discuss about the structure and morphology of urban settlements. We'll discuss something. We'll discuss about all those theories which has been given about the urban morphology. Okay, and what is the scope of urban morphology? If we'll be studying about the urban morphology, it's gonna give you different ideas about how the urban places are flourishing, how the urban places are developing, and what are the different types of planning that can be done to improve the urban development. Okay, so there is still a scope in which we can develop the urban spaces. Those are found in and around the globe now, because you might have heard about the city floodings. Okay, flooding now, because the city has not been planned or drainage systems are not proper. So to if you do understand the urban morphology, then you will understand what are the different dimensions in which a urban place or an urban place is basically being affected. Now, if that urban place do not have proper drainage management, so definitely there will be urban flooding. And urban flooding is basically a present day topic, and you can study about the Chennai flood. You can study about all the cities which get flooded, even during the rainy days. Okay, so out of the rainy days also sometimes you see flash flooding, so which is occurring. And if you do understand the urban morphology, you can tackle with those kind of problems. So there are different schools of thought about urban morphology, and different geographers or they have given different viewpoints about the urban morphology, and different theories has been also given. I'm not discussing about all these school of thoughts. You can go through it. Okay, so there will be few differences in which the French school of thought will be different from the Chicago school of thought. Why? Now, because the urban settlements which are found in European region, okay, so mostly in France, urban settlement will be having a different city concept, and those will be influenced by the natural environment which is available to the people of urban places of France. But here in Chicago school of thought, that will be somewhat different, because the natural environment is very different. There is spatial variation in terms of resource availability, in terms of climate. Now, if the urban spaces or the urban settlements of humid region will be very much different from that of the urban settlements of temperate region. And now, let's suppose the Indian school of thought about the urban settlement will be very different from that of the French school of thought. Now, because we have different dimensions. Now, because our economic condition, our socio-political condition is something different, our environment is something different, our climate and the soil or the natural environment that is basically surrounding us is something different. But there in France, during winter they will be having chilling cold. Okay, and they will have to plan for those kind of extreme climate during winter months. So their urban places will be something different. So in that way, the different theories have evolved through time, and we'll be discussing about few theories. So what are the different main contribution that has been given here? You can look into this. Okay, first of all, we'll be discussing about the concentric zone model, and that has been given by E.W. Burgess, and remember, all those people who are interested in appearing net, these three theories that we'll be discussing, most of the time that comes in net exam also. Okay, you have concentric zone model, then you have sector model, I think, and another one is your multiple nuclei model. Okay, Homer here, I think he has given it. So what are the different concentric zones? Concentric zones are basically what we have already discussed when we have discussed about the rural morphology, and it's about different zones. Okay, so if we will be looking into any city area or urban places, it will be having a CBD. CBD is a very popular concept, that is your central business district, and that will be that will be performing a lot of functions. Okay, that will be giving you a lot of services, and that will be the headquarter of any city. Then comes the zone of transition and working men's house, then middle income house, then these are the commuters zones. Okay, let's discuss these uh, concentric zones. So first of all, you have CBD, and it is the most innermost circle of any urban place, and it is this part is mostly non-residential. Okay, so what are the different uh, different things that you can find there? So trade and business is the primary function that is being performed by the CBD of any urban centers. Then different departmental stores are also found there. You have different banks and offices. Now all the tertiary activities are found near the central business district. Okay, so that will be the central point of any urban center. Then you have the zone of transition. Okay, so the zone of transition is basically that zone, as we have already discussed while discussing about the rural morphology. You know, the head community or the dominant community will be inhabiting the central place of any rural settlement, and then comes the zone of transition, in which a lot of people in rural areas, they are living just like milkman, goldsmith. We have already discussed about this. So this is the zone of transition. Okay, and then comes the zone of working men's house. A lot of people who are working in and around the city will be living in the third zone. So if this is the first zone, this is the CBD, and that will be performing a lot of tertiary activities, and a lot of services will be performed by this CBD. Then comes here the zone of transition, and these are basically old-fashioned private houses which are gradually taken over by offices, and this area also has some light industrial and manufacturing unit. Now although the industrial and manufacturing unit in today's world, we don't find uh, this kind of manufacturing unit being set near the zone of transition, but during that period when Burgess has given this theory, so he has observed. Okay, so that's why we are seeing this zone of transition in the second zone, and poor people basically live here. Okay, and in urban settlements, I think we have discussed about the gentrification, and that concept is well suited to the zone of transition. Now because a lot of poor people and laborers, they do live here, and sometimes that gentrification leads to the development of slums within different corners of the city, and that zone is basically the second zone. Then zone of working men's house. So they basically reside with their family, and and this is to some extent far from the CBD, and it is basically the residential zone. This zone of working men's house is basically residential zone, and a lot of functions are not being performed here. Then zone of better residence, it is basically high class residential zone. It is a high class residential zone where a lot of rich people they prefer staying. Then your commuter zones are basically that connected with the roadways and different transport and communication facilities. So what are the shortcomings of concentric zone model, and basically the limitations and drawbacks of concentric zone model? So this is mostly applicable to the American cities, and where a lot of poor people they live in city cores, just like what we have discussed, the transitional zone where a lot of poor people they live, and rich people basically live in suburbs. But here in India, if you'll be observing the empirical pattern of Indian urban centers, then you will get that a lot of rich people they prefer to live nearby the CBD region, or nearby the zone of transition that has been marked by EW Burgess. So that is one problem. And this problem of isotropic plane. Now, because Borges assumed, okay, the assumption that has been taken for the concentric zone model is that the plane is isotropic plane. I mean, there will be evenness in the plane area. So definitely in a country, or it will be taking if we'll be having a look at the global perspective, all the urban places will not be having an isotropic plane. Now, why? Now, different areas will be having different physical barriers. Now, different physiographic features basically being seen there, and it will be take the example of Bhubaneswar as a city in Odisha. So you have Khandagiri and Udayagiri caves. You do have different mountains of Eastern Ghat that is bordering the Bhubaneswar area. Then you have a river. Okay, so you have a river. So all these are different physiographic features. So you can simply assume that all the cities will be settled in an isotropic plane. Okay, so that is another problem. And here the one of the criticism is that the theory is too hypothetical in nature. Now, because if you'll be doing the empirical studies in any part of the globe, then this kind of concentric zones cannot be found. Okay, so these are basically normative in nature. What are normative in nature? Normative are basically the data basically are observed in nature. Now, these are not empirical studies. In empirical studies, you find a bunch of data, a very large database. Then you work through that database so that you can develop a theory or you can develop a model. But here, Burgess did that. Okay, and if you'll be looking into these concentric zones, and what he has observed in and around the Chicago region, he has given this model. A different modification has been given, and why it becomes relevant even in today's world, because He was the one who has tried for the first time to model the morphology of any urban center. Okay, and even few of the American and European cities do provide a similar concentric zone model. So that's why it becomes relevant in the present world also. And this can be modified to some extent. This can be modified into the metropolitan areas. Okay, then comes your sector model. So within sector model, Homer here, okay, so he has no to overcome the criticism that has been faced by Burgess. He has given the sector model, so in which he has divided the urban places or the urban settlements into different sectors. So different sectors will be performing different functions so that it will overcome the shortfalls of concentric zone theory. Okay, so this is the sector model in which you can see this is the CBD, or CBD is basically the central business district, and it will be performing, it will be having the same characteristics that has been given by Burgess in concentric zone model. It will be non-residential in nature or character, and a lot of trade and market activities will be happening in and around this CBD region. Okay, and factories and industries will be connected to the CBD region. Okay, in different lines, in horizontal manner. Then low class residential zones, these are middle class residential zones, and these are high class residential zones. So these are different sectors that has been given by Homer here. Okay, what are the different features or main features of sector model? A city basically develops is a series of sector, in a series of sector, and not in concentric rings. And to some extent it is true for uh, some cities, and this may not be applicable to each and every city. That is basically planned in nature. So different sectors will develop in different manners, so that will not follow any concentric ring patterns. So different areas attract different types of activities. And now let's suppose an area which is nearby the CBD and do really provide you favorable services. Then a lot of rich people will be living there. That is basically the high class residential area, and where mostly the middle class and the low class residential areas will be. So low class residential areas will be in that region where a lot of services will not be available, and and people have to uh, fight through different uh, to fulfill their needs or to fulfill different requirements. They will have to they will have to go to maybe different places, so where services will not be easily available. Okay, as the city grows, activities within CBD grow outwards, and it is basically in a wage set. Okay guys, just give me 2 to 3 minutes. We'll be discussing about the multiple nuclei model. We'll be back. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so we have discussed about the concentric zone model, the sector model, and we'll be discussing about the multiple nuclei model. Now, here you don't find the concept of CBD. Now, although there is the concept of CBD, but it will be represented through multiple nuclei. It will be, a lot of urban places will be having different nucleus region. Okay, so that has been given by Ullman, okay, Harris and Ullman. So it was published in the Nature of City article. So what are the different salient features of the theory? You have a CBD, okay, and you can look into the diagram here. So this is the CBD region, and it will be having multiple nucleus region. Okay, so that will be performing a lot of functions also. So what is the central business district? It is basically the financial district of the city, and it will give you different services like financial activities like bank, real estate, insurance companies. Then you have smaller CBDs which have specialized services. Okay, then wholesale and light manufacturing units. So they do produce clothes or manufacture furnitures, electric goods, and different other manufacturing units. Then you have residential districts. So within residential districts, you can look into different categories of residents. Okay, so low class residential zones. Then you have middle class residential areas. You have high class residential areas and residential suburbs. So there are different places that has been suggested by Harris and Ullman in this model. You can see. Okay, so lower class residential areas are these areas. You have middle class residential areas, so which are basically bordering the CBD region and the zone of transition. Okay, so basically the upper class residential zones are towards which is not nearby the CBD of the urban place. So what are the outlying business districts? So those are basically located near the middle class and high class residential zones. And these districts basically offer you specialized services. Okay. So what are the specialized services? It will be providing you education, it will be providing you health facilities, and it will be providing you different other services. Then what are heavy manufacturing industry district? So this district is located near the transport nodes and due to easy accessibility. Okay, so you will be seeing, and it will be nearby the commuters zone, so where roads are connected and heavy manufacturing and industrial district will basically be seen there. Then industrial suburbs, these are basically the outskirts of the city, and those are basically located near the periphery of the urban centers. So which are the main criticisms of a multiple nuclei model? So this theory basically didn't consider the heights of the buildings. Now because there may be vertical expansion. Okay, so there is no division between the zones. So within these zones, there is no division. No division has been done. Even within the zones, there should be some sort of divisions. Then each zone displays heterogeneity. Okay, so all the zones basically cannot be homogeneous in nature, definitely. And here each, now if you will be looking into the C, okay, look at the residential lower class residential zones and look at the zone of transition. Okay, so this is the zone of transition and they are heterogeneous in nature. Okay, so this zone of transition will be also heterogeneous in nature. So this is what the criticism. Then government policy and physical relief are not considered, just like we have discussed about the Burgess model, where the isotropic plane, the hypothetical uh, example of isotropic plane has been given. In that case, here also, if we'll be looking into this, the physical reliefs has not been considered, and even different government policies are also not been considered. Now why it is important to understand the government policy and to understand the physical relief? Now because they influence the settlement patterns. Now if government will find some regulation or initiate some regulation in a city, that these parts of the city will not be used for residential purposes. So you can't simply divide that region or zone as a residential zone. So you have to take into consideration these government policies, and you have to take into consideration the physical relief part. And because different physiographic divisions or different physiographic features really play a vital role in terms of shaping the urban centers. Okay, so these are the different comparisons that has been given in this table. Okay, so here in the concentric zone, the city structure is basically concentric zones, and in the sector model, and the structure is basically within the sectors. Okay, you will be having different sectors, and in multiple nuclei model, it will be also, it is basically being divided into different zones also. So it is basically applied, all those theories are basically applied to Chicago, and it may not be applicable to Indian cities. So that is another criticism. Okay, different criticisms that we have already discussed has been given here, and comparisons are also given here. Okay, so what are the dynamics of urban morphology? I think we have already discussed about the urban morphology. What are the different dynamics of urban morphology? It is basically what are the different different parts, different dimensions of urban morphology. Okay, different zones of urban morphology. So first of all, you will be having a central business zone. No matter whether that urban place is following the concentric zone model or the sector model or the multiple nuclei model, it will be having a business district. Okay, the central business district that will be mostly characterized by non-residential, and it will be performing a uh, lot of services. It will be performing a lot of functions, and that will be mostly tertiary in nature. Then retail and wholesale and commercial area. So all the urban places will be having some areas so which will be used for retail purposes, which will be used for wholesale purposes, and which will be used for commercial purposes. Okay, now just like you can take the example of Cuttack. So there are different areas which has been assigned for no commercial purposes, for wholesale purposes. Okay, then you have industrial areas, and that basically manufactures a uh, different furnitures, clothes, electronic goods, and even heavy industries are also nearby the urban places. So, or industrial regions also, or industrial areas are also part of the urban morphology. Then residential areas. So definitely there will be residential areas in urban centers, and different classes of residential areas will be found, uh, just like just like these models that has given you some idea about where the lower class residential areas will be and where the higher class residential areas will be. So to understand this, okay, to understand to understand these, you can look into these previous theories, and these residential areas are a very important uh, part of the urban morphology. Then urban villages. So urban villages are basically the rural urban fringe area. Okay, so in the previous class also we are discussing about this fringe area. It is basically a transitional zone between the rural area and the urban area, and it is basically characterized by rural land use. Okay, now even different urban aspects can be found there, so that's why you are calling it as no rural urban fringe. So this is basically a transitional zone, and due to the expansion of city, so basically villages change their occupations, and agricultural farms are replaced with industrial parks, high class residences, amusement parks, and so on. And if you'll be observing, the development of any city, or the growth of, mostly the growth of any city, you'll observe that when it grow outwards, so what will happen? So there will be different rural settlement. Okay, so when the city will grow, it will have both the characteristics of the urban culture and the rural culture, and these these agricultural farms basically get replaced with industrial parks and high class residences. Okay, so these are basically your rural urban fringe areas, or else you can call the part of your urban morphology, that is your urban villages. Then slums. Okay, slums are also important parts of urban morphology. Now why? Now because a lot of people, they start migrating to the urban places for job opportunities. So the poor people, they basically start residing nearby all those areas. Okay, and which will suit their standards. Now if a low income group uh, Now imagine a low income group man has migrated to a city like Mumbai. So where he will be staying? Now, although he hasn't settled in terms of his job, in terms of his employment. So first of all, you have to understand where they will be staying. Now, because the room rent in areas like Mumbai will be very high, and so he will be preferring those areas which will be providing his some kind of basic facilities, and they will be staying there, and they will basically develop this kind of slums. And different names of slums has been given. Slums are well known as shanty towns in Ireland, favela in Brazil, rancho in Venezuela, Variadas in Peru, then Villa Miserias in Argentina, Borang Borang in Philippines. So these are different names of slums in different parts of the globe. Okay, so this is how census define the slums in India. Okay, so Register General of India has adopted the following definitions. So according to the 2011 census, so all specified areas in towns or cities are basically notified as slums by state or local government and UT administration under the act, okay, including the Slum Act. Then all areas are recognized as slum by state or local government or UT administration, where basically the housing and slum boards, which may have not been formally notified as slum under any act. Then you have a compact area of at least 300 population or about 60 to 70 households of poorly built congested houses. These are basically in unhygienic environments, usually with inadequate infrastructure, and that basically lacks proper sanitary and drinking water facilities. So this is the definition, or and this is basically the slum area, okay, that has been defined by the Census of India 2001. So the Census of India 2011 categorized three types of slums. One is your notified slums, are recognized as slum by state or UT government by Slum Act, and are governed by slum boards. Okay, so if that those slums has been notified, then it will be termed as notified slums. Then recognized slums are basically recognized as slum by state and local government, but no administrative unit has been formed yet. Then you have identified slums. These slums are identified during census enumeration, but not recognized officially. Okay, so what is the definition? A compact area of at least 300 population or about 60 to 70 households of poorly built, congested tenements in unhygienic environment, usually with inadequate infrastructure and lacking in proper sanitary and drinking water facilities. So this is the definition that has been given by the Census of India. So settlement hierarchy, just like in the settlement hierarchy that we have already discussed about the rural settlements. Okay, so what are the different factors which are contributing to the settlement hierarchy in urban areas, and just like in rural settlement we have already discussed about the isolated uh, rural settlements, your hamleted rural settlements, and village. So those are the hierarchy of rural settlement. Now here in urban settlement, you will be having different types of hierarchy based on different functions it is performing based on the population size. So different hierarchy can be assigned based on the population size itself. Now because the urban places are basically um, if we'll be looking into the concepts like metro city, mega city, and some other concepts like conurbation or megalopolis. So all these are different concepts which has been used, and those concepts can be used for urban settlement hierarchy. Okay, so what are the different factors which are contributing to the hierarchy of settlement? So first of all, you need to understand the size of population, and that is what we were basically discussing. Okay, so size of population plays a very vital role in terms of urban hierarchy, and if that urban place is having, let's say, 5,000 population, or let's say 10,000 population. Okay, so different classes of towns has been also, I think 6 classes of towns has been defined by the census of India, and those classes are based only on the population size. Okay, then based on the functions performed, we have already discussed about different functional classification of towns, and based on the functions performed, we can simply assign the urban settlements. And now let's suppose you want to know the administrative towns, you want to know the educational towns. So based on your requirement, the hierarchy will be different. And let's suppose based on the uh, administrative function, how you gonna uh, how you gonna assign numbers to all the Indian cities, let's suppose, and you have uh, countries major cities. So definitely you will be assigning Delhi as number one now, because in terms of administration it is performing a lot of functions. Okay, so in that way the hierarchy can be performed. Then sphere of influence. So what are the different sphere of influence? I mean, all the factors. A city may have sphere of influence, beyond hundreds of kilometers. Now let's suppose Delhi as a city is influencing up to 500 kilometers. Okay, and while Mumbai as a city is basically influencing a lot of people up to 600 kilometers. Okay, maybe we don't have much cities nearby, so that's why the city of Mumbai will have a greater influence, or maybe different specialized functions that are being performed by that city. So the influence, okay, so the dimension of influence becomes huge. Okay, so this is how the sphere of influence basically affect the hierarchy of settlement. Okay, I think the central place theory we can simply complete today only. We do have 15 minutes left with us. We have discussed the rank size rule yesterday. We will briefly discuss about the rank size rule today, and tomorrow we'll be discussing about this concept of central place, and what is the central place, what are the different principles of central place, what are the assumptions that has been taken by Walter Christler and Augustus Loss. It will take some time. I'm leaving it for tomorrow. Okay, so just like yesterday we have discussed about this rank size rule, and that was basically postulated by J.K. Jiff in 1948, and it is basically a simple model that that explains about the population size of any city. And the mathematical formula that has been given by J.K. Jiff is basically the Pn, which is the population size of a given city, is basically the population size of the largest city divided by the rank of the city. Now let's suppose the population of the largest city is 30 lakhs. Okay, and you want to find the population size of fifth largest city of, okay, fifth largest city of that region or of that country. So then what we can according to JKGF, what we can actually find, so you can simply put this formula, which is basically 30 lakhs, okay, divided by 5, so which will be 6 lakh. So the population size of fifth largest city of that region will be around 6 lakh. And this is basically hypothetical population, and the exact population will definitely vary. And and we have already also discussed about the deviations. Okay, what are the different deviations that we have already discussed? If we'll be performing in a graph, okay, so if this is the rank size, then there will be some binary elements, and there will be some uh, primate elements. Okay, so in binary elements, what does that really mean? Maybe two large cities will be having a very large population. Let's suppose the largest city, okay, the largest city is having 30 lakh population, and the second largest city is having 29 lakh population. So this kind of situation is basically considered into the binary element. And what is the primate city concept that has been given by uh, Mark Jefferson, and that is basically if the population size of first city will be more than double of the second city, and even more than 5 times the third city. So this is your primate element, and there will be urban supremacy. Okay, so there will be urban supremacy in primate city concept. Okay, while in binary the binary city concept, here you will not be having any urban supremacy. But in uh, but in primate city concept, you will be having this, and this is the rank size rule city element. So how it is applicable to India, and this study is showing us the rank size population. This is showing us the rank size population of India. Okay, so there will be a difference. Definitely, there will be a difference in terms of actual population and in terms of rank size population. This is the curve of rank size population, and this is the curve that basically shows the actual population of 2011 data, the urban population of 2011, and these are the different cities that has been considered to understand the rank size population and actual population. And even here you can look into the city primacy. Okay, the primate city concept, it will be looking into the Kolkata. Kolkata has been used as an example of primate city concept in India. Now because Kolkata is having a huge population, but still there is difference in terms of actual population and expected population in nearby cities. So, what are the different measures of urban hierarchy in global city concept? Okay, guys, we'll be discussing tomorrow about this, and the last unit is left. So, we'll be discussing this unit and the fourth unit from past block. So, these are the things we are left with, and I will discuss something about the population theories and population policies. Okay, so tomorrow. Do you have any doubts? Any doubts or concerns? Anyone want to say? Okay, then see you tomorrow then. Okay, thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.